Are you ready? Hey, everybody.
Hey, Pop.
Hello, everybody.
People in the back.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to the Inner Loop.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to the Inner Loop.
Without further ado.
Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get started.
We should get started. We're
Yeah.
rambling. I'm rambling.
We're going to get started.
Welcome to the Inner Loop Radio. I'm Abby Newhouse.
And I'm Aeriel Merillat.
Thank you for joining us.
If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and check out our website at theinnerlooplit.org.
For any new listeners out there, here on the Inner Loop Radio, we delve into all things creative writing, whether that be inspiration or craft, publishing or editing, how to make a living, or just how we all sit down each day in front of an empty page.
We invite friends and local writers onto the show to talk about their writing journey, what inspires them, or to delve deeper into craft.
On today's show, we're recording from the lobby of the Line Hotel, and we want to talk about how the typical chords of writing, like time, place, and character, how they manifest in poetry. I'm not a poet, so this is probably a dumb question, but I've always thought of poetry as being like out of space and time. Kind of this own little snippet of reality, sort of. So, Aeriel, you're kind of a poet these days. You've been dipping your toe in. How does time, place, character, all these kind of elements you might expect in fiction or whatever, how does that show up in your poetry?
It's true. I have been identifying as a poet lately.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know it took a long time. Usually I'm a fiction writer. And when I started writing, I gravitated towards fiction because I really liked the flexibility, to play with character and plot and time. And for some reason, I thought you couldn't do that in poetry. Like I had this idea in my head, like you can't do that. Poetry is like about images and flowers and things like that. But recently I started writing poetry again, and I realized that it just like time moves differently in poetry than it does in fiction, but like not in a bad way. And you can do a lot of different things with poetry, like focus on like a hyper specific moment in time and capture it in like a way that you can't in a short story. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, you can even do like characters and plot and stuff in poetry, which was a big surprise to me.
How do you do it?
Well, it's forced me to slow down a lot because I have to be very like particular about, my word choice and like details and things like that. And I have to be very like intentional about my writing, which has actually made me a better prose writer, I think.
We have a dog. We got a dog in the hotel. It's made you be more intentional, is that what you said?
Yeah, it's made me be a more intentional writer because I have to slow down and focus on the specific words.
Yeah, it kind of feels like you can't spare any words at all.
There's not a lot of room.
Yeah.
But yeah, what about you? What about your nonfiction?
Well, I mean, nonfiction's a little bit easier, I think, with these elements. Sort of. I don't know. Nonfiction, I was kind of taught, I was raised in nonfiction with like a lyric form. And so instead of like a chronological, I was born and then I died, whatever type book, essay, I was kind of taught to think of it as like little bubbles of memory that just kind of like show up in different places. And so the timelines for nonfiction, I feel like can just kind of go all over the place, however you need it to make sense. It's less about like beginning and end and more about like what moment in time makes this essay make sense. And so I've kind of thought about it that way. And then lately I've thought of place totally differently because this collection that I'm working on, Utah is basically like a character. There's no way to analyze culture and place without really getting into the details of where you are and what it means to live there. So it's been interesting to write from that perspective and just kind of see, I don't know, how this place that I grew up in that you know so much about, how it can become something new and change your story in ways you didn't expect.
Yeah, I love that idea about the bubbles of time. It's really beautiful.
Okay, this is interesting. I mean, we're getting into some good stuff here, but I don't want to keep going until we have our author's corner spotlighted author for May, Amanda Shaw. We're going to talk with her about how she structures these important concepts in her poetry.
Hey, this is Abby. There's a great podcast I'd like to tell you about, The Spark Parade. Ever wonder what makes your favorite artists tick? On the Spark Parade podcast, your host Adam Unzi geeks out with the artists and entertainers you love about their cultural spark of inspiration. You'll hear from artists like Margaret Cho on Velvet Goldmine, Chris Gethard on Grosse Pointe Blank, Sleater Kinney on Patti Smith's Horses, Bob the Drag Queen on The Color Purple, Fallout's Ella Purnell on Brandi Carlile's The Story, and many more. The Spark Parade, your favorite entertainers, their favorite entertainment. Join Adam every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Inner Loop Radio. We've been discussing time, place, and character, and now we'd like to welcome Amanda Shaw, author of It Will Have Been So Beautiful, from Lily Poetry Review, and this month's Author Corner Spotlight. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Aeriel.
We're so excited to have you here in this hotel lobby.
Yeah.
It's
So
fancy. It's a fancy lobby.
it's quite beautiful in
Yeah.
here. They've got a vibe.
It's true. Yeah, we're so happy to have you. And I'm really excited to talk about poetry with you as a fellow poet.
I know. Two poets in one little
Abby, come
bunny.
be a poet with us.
Yeah.
You want
Actually,
to
what you
Join the
said-
dark side.
What you said about your nonfiction is very similar to what I might say about poetry.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Poetry isn't necessarily known for telling stories, but typical writing structures still show up in the form of like character and conflict and setting. So, Amanda, how do you tell stories in your poetry?
So I was thinking about this, and I think there are two major components to this, which is in an individual poem, a reader is going to add a story in no matter what. Even like their erasure poems, which maybe are 3 words, and somebody's going to read it and bring their own. We just want to tell stories. That's just how humans are. So that's an advantage if you have somebody who's sort of patient enough to go in and understand, because people don't understand this a lot about poetry, that what you bring to it is really a huge part of the poem, because they've been taught that's not the case. And they've been taught that like a poem is something that the author is telling you that you have to solve and then sort of write a paper about what it actually means. And, you know, I, as a teacher myself, I think poems do have, there's this, you know, there's evidence for what a poem is saying if you're looking at the language, but it's really not predominantly about meaning so much as it is a shared meaning between the image on the page, the writer, and the reader who has the image. So even just an image is, you're going to bring a story. But in terms of I think that every individual poem, you know, we have this standard schism between narrative and lyric poetry that they talk about in the poetry world. But it's a pretty false dichotomy. I mean, in addition to what I was saying about us bringing stories into whatever we're reading, there's also lyric moments within a narrative poem that make it not really, I don't think any poem is ever going to be pure narrative, nor is it going to be pure lyric. So within an individual poem, you always have, like anything, a beginning, middle, end. That's a story, right? That's all you need. But poems tend to treat the middle differently, I think. So in that, the first lines are always setting something up, and you're thinking about what that setup is. But then you might all of a sudden be somewhere else entirely. And where you are might make sense to you as a reader, but it also might not. And so poetry just works in those leaps, but the story's still there. And so, when you study the sonnet, for example, a sonnet, it's supposed to be an argument, but it's actually a story in the sense that you're starting with setting up a situation, and then you have what they call the turn, right? And the turn is where whatever you've set up changes direction. So some poems just turn and turn and turn again, but they're still heading towards something once they've turned. So that's an important element of any poem. But when you're lucky enough to have a book, you should be telling a story because, again, the reader is going to bring that story in. You're telling it through where you place the poems. You're telling it through all of the other elements around the book, like the chapters. I mean, they're not chapters, but they're sort of like, the table of contents, whether they're sections, whether there are epigraphs. And I used all of those in my book because I wanted it's 5 sections, and I wanted it to come across as sort of 5 acts. And so in the beginning, a lot of the reason that when you were talking about Utah as a place and place as a character, it really resonates with me because I have places that really are almost like alive in the poems and in the book. So there's a lot of work about my childhood in New Hampshire. And then there's a lot of work about Switzerland, which is, my husband is Swiss. He grew up there, and I have been going there. We've been married for a long time. So I've been going there since, I think the first time was in 1998.
Wow.
And so early on, I have 3 poems in the book, and they're all called These Mountains. And they're These Mountains 1, These Mountains 2, These Mountains 3. And the first of them, I think it's the 3rd poem in the book, and that is about the first time I saw the Alps. And I was with my husband, so he's a character in the poem. And then later on, there's a poem about being with him in France at an area of France that has a lot of volcanoes. Not active volcanoes, but you can see they're hills that are within a larger range of mountains. And so there's that. And that poem is really very story-like. And then I have a poem after called These Mountains 3 that is set in Switzerland again, but I'm up in a balloon in an airplane. It was amazing. It really happened. And we're floating above the Alps. And this happened years and years after the first time I saw them. And so in the first time I saw them, I had this sense of awe and alienation because it was so different from anything I'd ever seen. They're so big, they're so humbling. And it was January and it was cold. So they were really like almost like knives or something, standing out against the dark sky. And I looked out the window, we were driving, and I looked out the window and it was like this wall of white,
right,
with these jagged edges. And and I was just, I didn't know how to feel about it, right? I was just overwhelmed. And then as it became home to me, as his family became home, as I went regularly, I still returned to the Alps in the book, but with a lot more familiarity and a lot more of a sense of this is a place where I can live. And so I kind of do the same thing with New Hampshire, where I have a line in there that is, these hills I thought were mountains. So in the sense, that's the setting, but it's the character development based on the setting in each case.
Totally.
So, you get in the way, it's so exciting to have a collection because you get to decide how these things appear next to one another.
Yeah. there's so much to think about with that, with, you know, because like you were talking about, every line is a jump in poetry. Every line could take you somewhere completely new. And then add to that, turning the page, you're somewhere completely new as well. Like no matter what, the white space in poetry can sometimes be more jarring than it is in fiction or nonfiction, where you're still kind of rooted. It's just different in that way. So it's interesting to see how it would all connect and be different within poetry.
Yeah, and I think as I was thinking about these questions, one of the things that's different is that you still have the classic narrative arc. You know, as I was talking about with in that there's a beginning, middle, ending, and there's conflict, right? There needs to be some kind of conflict, or it's just this pretty image. But it kind of works more in juxtaposition, right? So you have the story, and then the ending isn't what you expected, but it talks to the rest of the poem. It has this leap in time, or this leap in language, or some kind of leap that tells you it's ended, but it's not through like a classic, there was the rising action, climax, falling action. It often you just sort of end with the climax.
Yeah, totally. No, that's true. That's just like the little ways that we morph and change these kind of like prescriptive elements, right?
Yeah.
The way that they show up these days, I think in pretty much all genres now, everybody's kind of challenging it and like just seeing what we can do, how we can be new and different. Yeah.
Yeah, genre's a thing of the past.
Yeah, we've surpassed it.
Maybe that means more people will be excited about poetry.
Yes. Yes, they better be.
Because it's true, like what you were saying about your own writing in nonfiction, the lyric essay is often considered a poem.
Totally, very poetic.
Yeah. And there are whole books that are just an amalgam or in and out of lyric moments and the story. So, and I also think that most stories that we are exposed to now in our own lives do happen that way. They're not, you know, we create a narrative around it, but really it's just a bunch of things happening.
Right.
And we are striving to find meaning in it through. And so I think it's nice when you can capture that reality in leaps.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was learning about nonfiction and kind of lyric and all of that. It was always linking ideas rather than people, places, things, you know? And so you just kind of found different moments in your lives when you would encounter the same thing, right? One of the very first essays I wrote had a strand that had to do with worms. It was like every time I'd like encountered a worm, but it all had such like meaning to me for what that essay was about. And putting it all together, all of a sudden there was that story. The worm's a character. The time doesn't really matter because the ideas are what's linking it. You don't really need that chronology as much, but I don't know. I could see that happening in poetry as well. Just kind of an idea blooming on the page with these little characteristics guiding it.
When we were in grad school, we had a break from a class, and everyone went to the bathroom, and there were two people at the mirror, and one of them asked the other for like a barrette. And my friend said, you know, the fiction writer tells the story of the two characters and the event. The poet tells the story of the barrette. And through the barrette, you get the characters, right?
Interesting.
It was a really insightful thing.
Yeah, it's like being like hyper specific about like focusing on a very certain thing. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and the story comes out in the detail, whereas, I mean, that's true in anything, but the detail starts as opposed to the story starting.
Right. Yes. I love that. The detail's the like impetus rather than the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like two different ways of looking at the same story.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Do you want to read us a poem or two?
Sure. So I wanted to talk about one of the questions was, how do you handle a huge expanse of time? As you were saying, you've always thought of poetry as Can you explain what you meant by it, actually?
I feel like for me, all the poetry that I've read, I've kind of just encountered it as a place out of time. You know, I actually have a friend who writes really beautiful poetry in this world that she's kind of just created.
Right.
Like you just go to a place that's in her head. And I think that's really beautiful. But yeah, it's different. It's a different kind of rooting, I think, to the poem than I would have to maybe if yours mentions New Hampshire specifically or something like that. You know, hers is just a place out of time. Anyway, I encounter that a lot in poetry where it's like I'm not quite sure where I am, but it doesn't really matter. It's not like I'm thrown off by that, but it's made me kind of understand poetry as a moment somewhere. It doesn't really matter where. A moment, a thing, like you were saying, like a hyper-focused detail, where these elements don't matter as much. But I think the way that you were talking about it makes it matter way more than I'd ever thought about as a non-poet.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like it doesn't have to follow the rules of like reality, because it's like more focused on the language or the image.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And I actually, this poem, I was thinking about this poem in relation to how the story gets told. And one of your questions had to do with how do you exist in time in many different times, right? How does the present exist in a poem? The poem seems like the present, right?
Right.
But how does the past come into it, and how does it imply the future, I think? Because a lot of times it's implied. So
all these layers of time,
Yeah, exactly. So this is the opening poem of the collection. So this is called And the Stars. And it was written in 2017 at a time when there was this NASA satellite called Cassini that was ending its journey. It had been out there for a long time, but it also was sending pictures back to Earth. And one of the pictures was of this little moon called Enceladus. And the pictures are gorgeous. So that's the setting. And the stars. In and out of the pull of Saturn, towards a ribbon-thin gap in its majestic rings, Cassini flies through full-fathomed dark in a choreographed series of turns, tracing ellipses among moons and ice. Headlines today, beside the newest record heat of a possible second genesis out of little Enceladus, phosphorus dust in lunar seas. Another arc. O dome of the sky, may it be far enough from each day's loss, from the lupine and the fireweed, the fleet trail of the flight of every winged bird of every kind. So then you start looking at your own work the way that, like, you know, readers are looking at it, and it's very interesting what you discover. So a lot of this stuff that's going on in this poem in terms of the time and setting and the fiction, the story it's telling, I didn't actually realize. But one of the things that I noticed as I was looking back at it, first, it started as a sonnet, and it is still a 14-line poem, and it does have those turns. So we begin literally in outer space, right? This satellite, but then it moves to the first 5 lines are just a single sentence establishing that, but then it moves to today, right? So that first turn is headlines today. So we come back to Earth, beside the newest record heat. And I was thinking about how that phrase, newest record, just those 2 words together tell you so much about time. Because a record is the past, right? But the newest record implies that that's going to change still, right? If you said the new record, you're saying, okay, today there's a new record. Whereas if you say the newest, and again, I'm not conscious of this isn't necessarily me saying, oh, I did this so perfectly, but it is very interesting to think about how you do that. And then to go back, I think Aeriel was talking about how language becomes the subject, right? And I think in this poem, one of the ways that the story gets told is through the shifting the last lines are the last line of every winged bird of every kind, that's coming from Genesis. And it just popped into my head as I was writing. But we've been thinking about stars and space, and the dome of the sky comes from Genesis, and all of that for so long, that you're talking about the beginning of human time at the same time that you're talking about space and space-time. But what you have is this sense of something that's been there forever, the lupine and the fireweed and birds. They've been there forever, but forever. They've been, in Genesis, they're created in this moment. But the point is that they carry from ancient time to now. And so all of that is in these 14 lines of it's like all space, all time in some ways. And I think you can find that in so many poems. And again, it has to do with that intentionality. And then the sort of shift at the end of taking that biblical language, I think, is indicating a lot that calls us back to that older language and makes us think about all of these, all of these different ways in which we've lived in language.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. No, honestly, this is going to make me read all poetry differently. I feel like we need a class on this, time and place in poetry. Aeriel, you teaching it.
Okay. I can do it.
She's in.
Let's team teach.
All of us together.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
You can find out more about Amanda Shaw, read more interviews and articles, and buy her book, It Will Have Been So Beautiful, on our website, theinnerlooplit.org/authors-corner. You can also catch her at our upcoming reading at Shaw's Tavern on May 21st and at the Writer Center for a virtual craft chat on Thursday, May 30th. Amanda, will you stick around for a little game?
Absolutely.
Up next, we play a little trivia game that connects place to story.
Hey, this is Abby. There's a great podcast I'd like to tell you about, The Spark Parade. Ever wonder what makes your favorite artists tick? On the Spark Parade podcast, your host Adam Unzi geeks out with the artists and entertainers you love about their cultural spark of inspiration. You'll hear from artists like Margaret Cho on Velvet Goldmine, Chris Gethard on Grosse Pointe Blank, Sleater Kinney on Patti Smith's Horses, Bob the Drag Queen on The Color Purple, Fallout's Ella Purnell on Brandi Carlile's The Story, and many more. The Spark Parade, your favorite entertainers, their favorite entertainment. Join Adam every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Inner Loop Radio.
We turn now to Memoryscape, a trivia game I made up where Aeriel and Amanda have to guess which book, play, or movie matches which time and place structure. It'll make sense when we get to it. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read off these. I'll start with an easy one, and we'll see if it makes sense to you when I say it. Okay, so this book takes place in West Egg and East Egg in the 1920s.
Great Gatsby.
Yay!
We should have said it at the same time.
Yeah, I know. Next time we'll 1, 2.
You guys are ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess Aeriel gets 1 point. Keep track of your
we're
points.
doing
Oh,
points?
we're doing points? Well,
Yeah,
I
know.
didn't answer because I was
I thought you were being nice.
I don't want to just jump in.
This is a competition.
Okay, well then let's start over.
Okay,
No,
are
I'm
you
just
guys ready?
kidding.
We're
You
gonna
get a
start for
point.
real.
You can have a point. Okay.
I need a head start.
Here we go. I'm going to see this one. You know the answer to this one.
It's true.
Okay, I'm going to do this
I
one.
saw the answers.
Uh-oh.
Some of
Some
them.
of them.
Oh my
She
God,
redid
it's
them.
rigged.
She cheated.
It's rigged.
Oh, she put them in
I
the
did more.
script.
I did more that she hasn't seen.
Yeah, she
Should I
did
start
new
with those ones? I'll
Yeah,
start
do
with
the new ones. Do the new
Okay.
ones.
This book/movie takes place in a secluded hotel in the 70s.
Oh, The Shining.
Yeah,
Oh,
good.
I haven't seen that. Good one.
Oh,
I know.
I haven't seen it either. You still know it's in a secluded hotel.
We have to go watch it, Abby.
I mean, I only saw it a few years ago. Somebody was like, "Oh my God, you've never seen it? You have to see
Oh,
it."
yeah,
and I was
that's
like,
one
"I
of those.
don't really." There's I don't need to be.
I'm not a big
I don't need any
horror
more
girl.
creep in my
There's too much creep everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. This book takes place in Colombia from the 1820s to the 1920s.
Love in the time of cholera.
No.
100 Years of Solitude.
yes.
That's my favorite
I knew it was
book.
Marquez, right? It had to be 100 years should have been.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping. Yeah. Okay. This book takes place in the two cities of London and Paris in the 1700s.
A Tale of Two Cities.
Oh. I was like, should I be obvious with this? Just that London and Paris are in so many books.
Yeah.
Okay. This book takes place on a large mountain surrounded by Tibet and Nepal in 1996.
Oh,
This is a hard one.
Ooh.
I don't know.
It's more contemporary.
Tibet and Nepal.
It's also a movie.
Can we have a clue?
Was that a Brad Pitt? I feel like he's been in every movie about Tibet.
Who was in this one? Jake Gyllenhaal,
Oh.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Keira Knightley.
Oh gosh.
Tibet and Nepal. You don't know which large mountain is there?
Oh,
Very
Everest?
large. Yes, Everest.
Everest. Wrong one.
Wow.
That was the first mountain. that came
So it's a book? I didn't know it was a book.
It's a book and a movie, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be obscure. Into Thin Air.
Oh, yeah. I actually read that book.
Yeah.
See?
I just saw the
See?
movie
Yeah.
randomly at a hotel like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. I
Okay.
didn't see the movie. No.
Yeah. Okay, let's try. This book takes place in the Manor Farm during the early 1900s.
Manor Farm.
Is it?
Is it Animal Farm?
Yes.
Oh,
Good
Oh,
job.
good
Wait,
job.
did you remember that one from the list?
no, but I heard farm.
Yep.
And that made me think of Animal
There's
Farm.
some clues in there. It's just like a poem. Every word counts.
Okay, I gotta listen more carefully.
I know.
then.
I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, this play takes place in Verona, Italy in the 14th century.
Gosh, there could be a number of them, right?
Probably.
Like Two Gentlemen of Verona, right? Isn't there?
That's a good point.
I think it's oh my gosh, now I'm forgetting. My students would just laugh at me that I can't remember. Merchant of No, that's not Verona. Romeo and Juliet. Oh my
Yes,
god.
there you
Oh
go.
my god.
Yes.
How did it take me that long?
Verona, where are stores? Yep.
I was
Yep,
just
yep, yep.
in Verona for the first time last
really?
summer.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Wow,
Yeah.
quit bragging. Wow.
It was my first time.
I'm still jealous.
Yeah.
Okay. This movie takes place on a desert planet in a galaxy far, far away.
Is it Dune?
Yes. Damn it.
I was actually thinking about Dune when you were talking about worms.
That one was it.
It was on my brain.
Worms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that one
it
was
could
supposed
be
to
Star Wars too.
Yeah,
right?
that was the trick
Yeah.
question. I was like, I'm gonna get him with this one.
No, she didn't get you.
Okay, how many more should we do?
Oh, I'm enjoying it. Keep
Okay.
it coming.
Okay, let's do like 4 more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
I'm gonna see what you guys know. Okay, this book takes place in Villanueva de los Infantes in the 17th century.
Don Quixote.
Yes, good
Good
job.
one.
Wow, I thought that one was pretty hard.
Yeah, that was hard.
It's
Okay.
like the only Spanish
Yeah.
book that I know from that era. So.
Yeah, one of the classics. Okay, this book takes place in, it's also a movie, takes place in Pondicherry, I think that's how you say it, India, and the sea in 1977.
And the sea.
And the sea.
Which sea?
Whatever sea is near Pondicherry.
The Indian Sea.
Fair
No.
enough.
It was also
and
a
the
movie.
sea. And Gandhi.
Mm-mm.
No, Pondicherry.
It's a visually stunning movie.
Visually stunning movie.
Okay, I'll give you 5 seconds.
Oh my god, is it Merchant Ivory?
No.
I feel like every set in India is
This
Merchant
one's
Ivory.
Life of Pi.
I loved that book.
Right? I
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought you would know it.
I actually taught that book.
Oh,
Mm.
really?
Yeah,
That's so
because
cool.
it's so much about storytelling.
Yeah, totally. And the ocean and stuff
Yeah.
becomes characters. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Okay, this contemporary novel takes place in 10,000 Islands, Florida.
What? Is it by Lauren
You
Groff?
should you should know this one.
Florida.
Is it by Lauren Groff? I don't know.
Wow, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed. Are you ready for the answer?
Sure.
Swamplandia.
Oh no!
That was my other Florida.
Miss Karen Russell.
But I missed the.
I should have known.
Yeah, that's Aeriel. Yeah,
I was
you
stuck
lost this game.
I was stuck with Lauren Groff.
I
You
know.
know, she opened a bookstore.
I heard.
It's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, by the University of Florida.
Yeah, I
whichever
think in
one.
Gainesville.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more. This movie takes place in Astoria, Oregon in 1985. It's like the only
Brokeback
movie.
Mountain.
No, it's like the only movie ever that would be in Astoria, Oregon.
That was a good guess.
I think she hasn't been to Oregon.
The landscape looks a little.
Yeah, I guess it's like Montana or
Yeah.
something, right? No, you're right. I mean, no, I haven't actually been to Oregon.
You gotta go. It's really nice.
But something to
Beautiful.
do with rain.
Aeriel knows this one.
I know it, but because I read it on the.
You
thing.
would have known it though, right?
Yeah, I actually just saw it in the movie theaters for the first time. They were replaying it. The Goonies.
The Goonies.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
a great movie. I'd
It's
never
I went
seen
and
it.
saw
an
the house
awesome
once.
movie.
Because we go to that coast almost every
Oh,
year.
where you can
Yeah.
see the rocks on the coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It's so
Cyndi
pretty.
Lauper.
Yeah. Okay, last one. This movie / book takes place at the Whistle Stop Cafe in the 1920s.
The Whistle Stop.
I just watched this.
It's a movie
Yeah, and a book, I believe.
Yeah.
in the 20s. Can we get a genre?
The movie came out in the 90s.
Okay.
It takes place in the South.
That I know. Is it? Oh my God.
It's kind of a Earl had to die type story.
Oh dear.
I'm blanking. 90s movie in the South.
5
Whistle
seconds?
Stop Cafe
Mhm.
is where my mind is going, but Steel Magnolias is the only thing.
I was going to say
Mhm.
Steel
Yeah,
Magnolias
yeah.
too.
Fried green tomatoes.
So
Yeah.
I knew.
All right, well, who was keeping track of their score?
You were supposed
Not
to
at
be
all.
keeping track.
I'm just so proud of Don Quixote.
I know.
Yeah,
that was
that
a
was
really
great.
good one.
That
I
was
think
great.
we're all winners.
I think
here.
so, except
Yes.
for you because you missed Swamplandia. So
It's true.
Ariel loses.
I'm
today.
sorry, Karen Russell, if you're listening to this.
Yeah, please let us know, Karen Russell, if you're listening to this. It will make our entire world. So
Well, I'm sure Lauren Groff would be happy too.
That's true.
that's
Shout
true.
out
We
to
would
the
take
Florida.
it. We'll
Yeah.
take it. Anyone from Florida? Well, that's our show. We'll be back next Monday with our Just Checking In series where we give our writer friends a call to hear how their writing lives are going.
If you want to learn more about The Inner Loop and all our programming, visit us at theinnerlooplit.org, where you can also donate to support us in local literature. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Inner Loop Lit.
Today's episode was produced by me, Abby Newhouse. Our executive producer is Rachel Kuntz, and our theme music is by Andrew Logan. Thanks again to Amanda Shaw for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, shout it from the rooftops,
Or better yet, leave us a review.
such as, I've never had a better time or place than when I'm listening to the Inner Loop Radio.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe
Subscribe so you can get inspired, get focused, and get lit.
on the Inner Loop Radio.